Now you have to understand, remember I have elementary, middle school, and high school experience. I was coaching varsity 6A football in Schertz, Clemens, on Friday night. I knew I got the assistant principal job at Schertz Elementary. I was already hired. They had already given me the job, but they're like, it's the middle of Texas football. We're not moving you, right? I was like, all right, we're good. They're like, we're at least, because I was in week 7, they're like, at least 3 weeks unless you go to the playoffs. All I know is somebody at central office, right, said, we want him over there Monday. So Friday night, I'm coaching varsity football. Monday morning, I'm an assistant principal at an elementary for the first time. I have never been on an elementary in over a decade since student teaching. You with me on this? When I walked into that building in the elementary, I was like, whoa. Little kids everywhere, right? 10 years varsity high school coaching, teaching secondary science. When I walked in the building, I was like, let's not step on them. Okay. And then I walked in the building and I said, what should I do? And they said, go around and meet everybody. And I was like, good morning. Good morning, everyone. How are you? Oh, good morning. Oh, wow. And they were like, Mr. Curtis, could you try to use your inside voice? What the hell's an inside voice? I got one voice. You with me on this? And it's not, I don't know if it belongs inside or outside, but 3 days ago, it was on a varsity football team yelling at kids, right? So they're like, you may want to try your inside voice. And I was like, test, inside voice. Okay, all right, let's work this, right? Now I start walking around the building. Now, please, y'all have to understand, for you guys that live in the elementary land, I just hadn't seen this in a while. And all of a sudden, you got kids walking down the hallway like this. What the heck? And then they got their hands behind it and doing something. What is that? They're like, that's bubbles and tails. I'm like, what kind of cult is this? And they're like, no, that's to keep their mouths from talking and their hands in themselves. And I'm like, we ain't got nothing like that at the high school, right? I'm thinking last Friday we had Slap Ass Friday. That's what I'm thinking. I mean, if you're at the high school, that's a truth. So just know, don't get offended. That's a real thing, right? So all I know is all of a sudden I've got kids with bubbles and tails, right? And then I went to cafeteria duty. And they were like, you have lunch duty. And I was like, oh man, I have lunch duty. Now I'm like, oh hell, I had lunch duty, right? And the first time I was ever at lunch duty in the cafeteria, it was chicken nugget day, and we had ketchup packets. So for those of you that are already laughing at me, I hope you're laughing with me and not at me. Because first new assistant principal at the elementary went in there and I'm opening up milks and I'm doing all kinds of things because we got little kids that don't know how to do that. And then they raise their hand. So I'm going to open up milks, got napkin. And then one lady, can you open up this ketchup packet? And I was like, yeah. So I went to open it, but I don't know how most of y'all open up ketchup packets in the real world. But I was like, I went to put it in my mouth and this teacher comes to me and she's like, stop. And I'm like, what? And she was like, he's probably tried opening it already. Now, have you ever noticed on the ketchup packets it has those little ribs at the top? Yeah, those were teeth marks. And there are sometimes ketchup packets are a little slippery. This one was a little saliva slippery. So I was like, I stood there with a master's degree, a man, and I said, how am I supposed to open up this ketchup packet? And she brought me over a string with a pair of scissors on it. And I said, I have never, ever used scissors to open up a ketchup packet, right? But I got it, right? Now here's the deal. About 2 weeks later, it was in the middle of the day, I was doing lunch duty. I now have an apron on. I have napkins, sporks, right? You hear me? Right? I'm getting down to their level. I'm using my inside voice. I got a string with scissors like a holster. I'm like snapping those things, right? And all of a sudden, through the door walks all the varsity football coaches from the high school. Hey guys! They all were drinking their Sonic drinks. They all wanted to come and see how I was doing, right? And they all walked up to me and they were like, where's your man card? I'm punching your man card right now, right? I loved it at the elementary, because I'm going to tell you right now, at the elementary, you are a flipping rock star. Just for working there. Like you don't, just for being, yeah, John, you don't even have to do anything special, right? And remember earlier, I love dogs, because I'm going to tell you right now, you walk into a first grade classroom and they're all like, Mr. Curtis! And I get all these hugs and knees, right? And I walk back out and I walk down the hall and I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot to tell that teacher something. I open the door, Mr. Curtis! It's like my dogs, they just saw me, right? They're just so excited to see you. And then the first time I had been there about a month and I was going through my HEB, and if you're not from Texas, you got to learn HEB, right? I'm just saying, going through my grocery store, and I remember there, and there was a little third grade girl with her mom, and it was the first time I had seen one of my students from the elementary at the grocery store. And I was pushing my cart and she was like, oh, Mom, it's Mr. Curtis. And I was like, are the paparazzi around or something? Is J-Lo behind me? What's going on, right? And all of a sudden, she was like, hey, Mr. Curtis, it's so nice to meet you. She's told me a lot about you. I was like, yes, ma'am, right? I was like, absolutely. I was like, okay. This was so awkward, but exciting, right? And I started pushing my cart away. And then for the first time in a long time, I was like pushing my cart away and going, is there any beer or wine in my cart right now? Because I'm going to tell you right now, little kids have no filter. Mr. Curtis likes Bud Light. Dilly, right? And I'll be like, oh, see, because I'm going to tell you right now, how many of you have attended a choir practice at a local Chili's or a restaurant, right? And y'all all got your drinks and margaritas there, and then all of a sudden you're at the restaurant, and out of nowhere the kid's like, hey! And you're like, and then you like push that drink to the side like it's not yours, that fishbowl margarita, right? And then you're like, hey! And it's so funny, you go see them away from the table, and then you walk back to the table, right? And the teacher's like, what's going on? And you're like, that's the kid I'm drinking about.